For me, when I'm stressed out, the only thing that makes me feel better is action. Taking steps to propel this goal forward. If I just sit around thinking, it just gets worse and worse. And I think that is what has led to my success, is just never taking a moment to stop and stew.
Welcome to the Flying Fruit Bowl, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I'm your host, Ernest. In today's episode, I have the chance to talk to the amazing Eric Hagan. Eric is an artist currently based in Washington, DC, who creates intricate, raw-touch-like images. Highly detailed and often monochromatic, his work contains an overlapping of multitude of faces that allow the viewer to reflect on their own thoughts and feelings of the work. Perfect. So I'll start where I started, everybody, which is tell us a bit about yourself and how you became an artist.
Yeah, hi. My name is Eric Hagan. I'm an artist. I've been a full-time artist for almost 3 years now, and I've been making art since I was, could barely walk. I live in Washington, D.C. That's where I mainly operate, but I'm from upstate New York.
So did you study art or are you self-taught?
I'm self-taught with art. I went to college for creative writing. I took a couple art classes there, but I didn't pursue it there. When I went to college, I was mainly intended to be a writer, but I just naturally made art the entire time. So, but I come from a family of art teachers. My mom was an art teacher.
So what are your thoughts on art education? Do you think it's important for an artist to have a degree?
I mean, I'm a proponent of education for education's sake. I don't think there's any negative drawback, unless you're an American and have the debt that I have. But
yeah.
I think all education is good. I don't think it's a requirement for pursuing a career in the art. In fact, most of the people I know who received an education in art did not take the route of being an independent agent and putting themselves out there. And I've been told that it's kind of a deterrent. I think for a lot of people, it becomes this echo chamber of like, we're all here on this campus trying to do the same thing. And I think it can be discouraging for a lot of people. It takes a little bit of ignorant brashness to kind of just jump into it blindly.
Yeah, because I think sometimes it becomes almost like a competition of who creates the best work, as opposed to like celebrating everybody's differences and kind of giving people the right direction they need. Because the problem with like an educational system, for the most part, is that you're adhering to a curriculum as opposed to giving people, open feedback and kind of nurturing their talent.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's tricky. It's definitely scary to be an artist. And I think you see enough people who have failed around you, you're going to take the safe route.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very, very true. So what is the biggest challenge of being an artist?
Personally, definitely financial. When you start, I find myself over the past couple of years, I've had, months with nothing, and then months where it all just comes down in a deluge of sales. And that's the event that will get me through the next, dry period of stressing out about rent and loan payments and all that kind of thing. But making the art is not an issue. The issue is keeping that stress from bleeding into the work, or unless you want to explore it, which I think it happens with my work. I think a lot of that stress has bled into it.
So how do you keep motivated when maybe you're having a month where like you're just not making that many sales or no sales?
For me, when I'm stressed out, the only thing that makes me feel better is action, taking steps to propel this goal forward. If I just sit around thinking, it just gets worse and worse. But And I think that is what has led to my success, is just never taking a moment to stop and stew.
But do you think that you can create too much work? Do you think you can overwork yourself?
Yes, I do. I do. Especially if you're just pushing yourself to be productive, the work itself can be contrived, rather than, riding this current of creativity or inspiration that has come into you. It's like you're just grinding it out like a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
That is my worst work, is when I just like make something because I feel like I need to.
Yeah.
So, well, go ahead.
Yeah, but I say, yeah, because I think the problem is that I see a lot of artists, and I know a lot of artists who just keep creating work and keep creating work, but they don't know what to do with that work. And it's great to have, a lot of work on display in a great portfolio, but it's like marketing is just as important as the work itself. Knowing where that work's going is just as important as the work itself. So I think it's a huge tricky balance of like trying to have the quantity to sell, but also the quality to actually sell.
Exactly. Yeah. I find if I'm making bad art, I'll just stop and I'll redirect, to marketing or networking or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really smart tactic, because the problem is that once, like anything in life, when you get bored of one thing, or you feel yourself being kind of less attracted or pulled away from a certain thing, you stop and try something else, or you stop and distract yourself with something else that's going to be hopefully just as positive and important to you as whatever else you're doing. So I think it's a great way to look at it, actually. I think more artists should probably take a leaf out of your book and actually think a little bit more about every aspect of art other than just the actual art itself, because art, the creation of the work, is only a small part of being an artist. And actually, like, kind of like, what are the different hats do you have to wear as an artist?
You can't do it these days without social media. That's huge. So I find myself being my social media manager, my sales team. Networking is huge. Pretty much every opportunity I've ever gotten has just been from just putting myself out there. I've sent thousands of emails. I've reached out to every single gallery, like in multiple cities. There's a lot of that. You have to keep motivating yourself. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle, I think, is critical to being successful as an artist. And, it can kind of suck when you have to like motivate yourself to, exercise and go to sleep early, because it's not like the sexy lifestyle of an artist people picture.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think it's not something that people don't talk about often enough, because you're right. It's like you have to give yourself working hours, even though you don't have, like, your own boss. You have to make sure that you're working within certain hours, or the work is being done, because nobody else is going to do it if you're not doing it.
Yeah. So for myself, it is my career. So 8 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday is just, I can't not be working towards this goal.
So that's great. And do you do all of your marketing and all of your sales within that time as well?
Yeah. Because I have drawn, sometimes if I'm inspired, I can draw for 10, 12 hours a day. Wow. But like, if I can get 4 hours, that's good. And then the rest of the day I'll allocate towards writing or networking, marketing.
That's so cool, actually. I feel like that's something I should talk more about, is like the structure of people's day in terms of being an artist, because you don't just sit around and create all day. That's just not the way it works, because you can't. That's a really interesting way of looking at it. And the fact you give yourself like a shift is really cool, actually. I think that's such a good idea. Such a good idea. It's
also because like I'm the only full-time artist like I think I interact with on a daily basis. So it's like I want to still have friends and
of course
family,
Oh yeah, of course. So, you still exist. Your life still exists outside of the art making as well, which is also another good point, actually, because you still have a family, you still have people you want to go to, you still want to socialize, you still want to have, to do things and have a life and go on holiday. There's the things you want to do with yourself. It's not just about creating art constantly. For some people it is, but not everybody is. Yeah,
in my thinking about it, it's like you're entering into a 40-year marathon, and you're not just going to hit the finish line by sprinting there. Like you need a stable life, and you need to just keep going even when things are rough, things are not looking good. You just little by little you get there.
It's true. You really do have to pace yourself as well, because I think a lot of people nowadays want success instantly. And the problem with that is that, like, as much as that might seem really good, that would also defeat the purpose of you creating work and having a long career. Because if you had all this success tomorrow, you wouldn't have anything else to strive for. So
Exactly.
it's like as much as it's cliche to say, like the journey is always just as rewarding as the actual the successful goals you achieve along the way. Like it really is, because the whole point is that like you're living the life that you want to live in a way that's positive to you, as
Yeah.
opposed to just having everything you want straight away. It's it's like winning the lottery. It always seems like a great idea, but in reality, I don't think it would be as enjoyable as it seems.
It's yeah, I mean it's what do you do after that, which
Yeah,
is, the cold part of getting achieving your dreams, like
yeah,
working towards something is almost more fulfilling than even
yeah.
getting there.
Oh, absolutely. Because the whole point is that you learn. You learn on the journey of getting to a certain goal, as opposed to like if you had that goal straight away, you just don't really learn anything, and you'll never be satisfied. There'll always be something else you want to do and another goal you haven't achieved, and it can actually be quite miserable, I think, actually, in many ways.
Mhm.
So
I also think finding success too early can be a curse to a lot of young
mm,
artists, especially in the days of TikTok and
yes,
and stuff. Like there's time if I became super famous when I was 20 years old, like my art, like I don't even want to look at it right now. Like the art I was making back then, like I needed time to develop
yes,
and continue. So like I think I might have been just like stuck in that time frame and
you
all
got
the negative
yeah.
baggage at that age.
That is such a good point as well, because the work you produce now is not going to be the same kind of work you produced back then. You have a
No.
lot more life experience, you have a lot more things you're probably thinking about, and you have a lot more kind of intention with the work because you've got a family to support, you've got yourself to support. Life is very different now. And I think that's
Yeah.
actually a really good point, this idea of people giving themselves time to kind of like, not necessarily find themselves, but kind of understand themselves, I think that's actually quite important. A lot of older artists I speak to, they've had careers for like decades, and there's a reason for that. Like, whereas an artist I speak to who are like maybe just starting out, it's fun to watch them kind of be excited and to grow. But it's like you're right, the work you're creating is going to be so different in a year's time, let alone 10 years time. So it's like
Yeah.
enjoy what you're doing now, what you're doing it, because you don't know how things are going to change.
Yeah. Every 2 years I look back on the things that I made and I just find it all repulsive. So that's to me how I validate that I'm moving forward.
Yeah, because also like you're as a person I interviewed the other week, because the interview has come up for you, said like with her own work as well. She was like, when I look back on it, I don't necessarily like it, but it makes me realize that my tastes have changed in a good way, and that the kind
Hmm.
of like my eye has changed, and it's a good way to look at it. Like you realize you've actually changed yourself from what you actually like yourself. So it's a great way to look at it in terms of realizing your own growth as an artist.
Yeah, you can't separate the artist's life from the work, and
Mm.
the artist's life will always bleed into the work.
Oh yeah,
And if you've lived in a bubble or haven't faced certain things, like you can't make truly authentic art.
yeah, that's very true. So at what point did you feel comfortable calling yourself an artist?
Um, it was probably when I got back from the Peace Corps.
Mm.
Um, I was in Zambia from when I was 23 till I was 26, and then I came back to America and I was like, I am an artist. I like declared it to
Mm.
everyone, much to the horror of my family. And I was like, this is what I will do no matter what. I moved to DC with my girlfriend Jess, and I tried for a while, ran out of money, got a job as a landscaper, did that for a while, quit that job, and I've been here ever since.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
See, but that's interesting because you tried it and it failed. It didn't go, well, it didn't fail. It just didn't work out the way you expected it to work out. And then you got a 9 to 5 or got a normal job. And you're like, actually, you know what? Actually, this is my calling. This is what I need to do. And I don't
Hmm.
care if I have to struggle or I have to, you know, make ends meet in various ways to get to this kind of goal. And I respect that a lot. So a lot of times people try and they don't necessarily work out and they're like, oh no, I'm gonna like leave it. And they kind of abandon the dream. And I like the fact
Yeah.
that you actually picked it back up and you were like, actually, no, you know what, this is what I want to do. And I, like, kind of like, how did you know that this is what you wanted to do? Is what I'm kind of curious about.
I just always, I think I always knew as a kid. But when I was in the Peace Corps, I lived without, electricity. I didn't have the internet. So there was just like 3 years of like no screens.
Oh.
So I just spent a lot of time thinking,
Hmm.
about my life, what I would do after this. And yeah, so when I got back to America, it was all or nothing. And when I did have to get a job, I was afraid of getting comfortable. I was afraid of, just getting comfortable in that job and letting the years roll by and being like, yeah, maybe I'll work on this, goal of mine on the weekends or whatever. So I picked the gnarliest, harshest job I could do. Just like, and I
Yeah.
picked a job that had 4 10-hour days and 3 days off, so I could, dedicate at least a little bigger chunk of the week towards this goal. I had
Hmm.
no life the whole time I was doing this.
Yeah.
As soon as I could get out, I did.
So that's really interesting, actually. And also the idea of having no screens, that's really interesting. So I do often wonder, like, how much more would get done in society if you weren't so distracted all the time?
Hmm.
Like, because the one thing about art and artists and creating art is that you're not looking at a screen whilst you're creating work. You're kind of
Yeah.
detached for the most part from any kind of outside influence, other than obviously like a podcast or whatever or music. But you're concentrating on something for a long period of time. I feel like there's a huge beauty in that because we're losing that a lot, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely like your perception of time greatly changes. Yeah, that 3 years felt like 10 years in a way, but it also felt like a week. It was strange.
Yeah, that is strange. But that's actually really interesting though. I really do wonder how that's affected, I guess, yeah, not just your work, but the way you think about things. And also the fact that because you've been without screens for like 3 years or the internet or electricity even, like the way you value things in your life is so different to other people now because you've been without it, you
Hmm.
know? And I think that's really interesting to me on like a psychological level because it's like, we take a lot of things for granted, but when we don't have them, we moan that we don't have them, but we don't realize that there are other people in the world who don't already have them in the first place, you know?
Yeah,
And then now you have them, you probably appreciate things a lot more than a lot of people do because you know what it's like to not have it. If that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that just fascinates me on a psychological level. I'm like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. But anyway, let's talk about your work. That's what we're here to do. So,
Uh,
can you please describe your work for those who may not have seen it?
I think in your notes you called it a like a Rorschach test for people.
Yes.
That is kind of what I go for. My images are these super dense figures. They're really like portraits, but they're made of hundreds of faces that are like woven in and out of each other,
Mm.
interlaid and kind of pieced together like a mosaic. And the purpose of this is to create a sort of like a psychological mirror because every face contains, certain emotions or reactions that the human brain will decipher. So when you have so many opposing things overlaying, people's projections are often what come to the forefront, which is what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to create something that people see that is a reflection of them.
But that's a really interesting way to look at your work. That's a very interesting way. And it kind of makes a lot of sense having spoken to you so far. Like, is there any particular key theme that you're actually looking at, or is it just psychological as a whole?
That's more of like the technique itself.
Hmm.
Every piece it does have a broader theme that I try to channel into it. But yeah, overall, like the structure of the piece is intended to be a mirror in a way.
Hmm. So, how intentional is the ambiguity in your work?
Ambiguity, I think that's also critical in coaxing people to self-reflect, because it makes them look a little closer, it makes them consider, it makes them ponder. And yeah, I think if you just if the art piece is like, this is the image, this is what it's about, think about that thing, I think a little bit of self-discovery is lost for the viewer.
Hmm.
So I have, inner meanings to these pieces that are for me, but not everybody's gonna see that. And I do like hearing what people see and how it makes them feel, because it's different between every person, and that's what I aim to do.
But do you ever worry that your work could be too ambiguous, or it could be like too busy, like visually?
Yes, definitely. Especially since I primarily get sales through social media, a lot of people just scroll through this thing. They give it 2 seconds, but it took 50 hours to draw, and you kind of need to look closer to see what's going on. So if it's too busy, if it's too ambiguous, yeah, I mean, it's like, if it could mean anything, it means nothing, which is a sentence we learned in creative writing when I was in college. But yeah, it's a tricky balance where you want to like coax people's what's the word? You want to like titillate their sense of mystery to make them kind of step closer, but if it's too loose, they're just going to walk away.
Yeah, because the thing is that you're right. If you have a lot of your sales through social media, people are looking at your work on a screen, and it's like your work is so busy and so detailed. Like you need to kind of see it, not necessarily in the flesh, but you need to see close-ups. We need to understand like how much detail is in that work. And do you ever feel like like a screen format, or like the size of obviously phone screens, just doesn't do your work enough justice?
Yes. Yeah, it's something I struggle with, because when I'm making the art, my nose is an inch from the paper,
Yeah.
and so this is my perspective of the art. But yeah, I really cherish in-person shows. That's why I aggressively go to them. Even if I find so much more success with social media, it's still important to me as an artist to show in person.
Like as somebody who creates such detailed work, like how do you try to make the viewer understand like the level of detail? Because I think it can be hard, because you can only really show, close-ups, time lapses, but it's kind of hard to actually explain or kind of really actually showcase the amount of detail, because it's hard even to explain. Like there's a lot of detail in your work. It's like they're very, very, very complex.
Well, something that I like to do is like, I don't want it all to be deciphered in one sitting or digested. Like, I want to create these things that you put on the wall of your house, and every day when you walk by it, you see something new. It just generates like a new experience every day. So I think that is the benefit of having, something that is hyper dense and hyper detailed. Because, I don't see art as just this linear like theme presented, done. It's like, that's just a meme in a way.
Yeah.
Not to talk smack about all art.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Because you want your work to have a life and existence once it's on somebody's wall, other than just it being there.
Yeah.
So you have a very particular style, and it's taken a while to develop. Like, talk us a bit through your style and how you actually managed to kind of come up with the idea and develop it. And also, like, is it important for an artist to have a style?
Yeah, I actually remember the exact moment when my style was born. I was 13 years old. I was in art class, and when I was that age, I really wanted to be a cartoonist. And so I was just drawing this cartoon, and I realized that it just like, it didn't give me anything. Like I felt no excitement. So I just started letting my hand just move, and it became automatic. And I just started like, piecing these faces together. And then after a while, it was like, oh, it looks kind of interesting. But like in that moment, I had this sensation that like I was really onto something, and it just like, it gave me goosebumps. It was like an electric bolt went through my body, and I was like, whoa, this is this is what making art is supposed to feel like. And I became obsessed with it, and I've never deviated from the style, because it's just been a compulsion to continue to explore and develop it. So like, I've never deviated from the style, but the style has evolved quite a bit. Just even year to year, it's significant. but yeah, it's a compulsion. It's just something that I need to do.
Do you ever worry though about repetition and like creating maybe like not the same image? Obviously, you wouldn't create the same image, but your image is looking too similar.
Yeah, I think that is an issue that a lot of artists deal with, especially if they gain, fame for one particular style. They kind of
Yeah.
become pulled into it, and you know, it loses excitement. Um, but the styles, I mean, I plan to keep making it until when it stops being exciting. But yeah, sometimes it does feel repetitive. But that's usually, if it does, I put it down and I go do something else.
Hmm.
And
And you come back to it.
yeah,
Yeah, because obviously, as long as it's exciting for you as the creator, then not that it shouldn't really matter to anybody else, because obviously it's your career, it definitely does. But it is also like it shouldn't really matter because you're the one creating the work and you're finding meaning and joy from it. So it's great. But as somebody who does, it was making a living out of it, who is, it's their career, like I do wonder how you do deal with the idea of like the repetition and kind of like when you go back to it after having left it, do you consciously make a decision to make things different, or do you just go back to doing what you did before?
um, it's a push and pull. Like sometimes I feel compelled to switch it up, but honestly, if I do that, it's more for like the public's perception of my work more than my own perception of my work. So
Ah,
there's a struggle there, because it is a tricky thing when you start living off your art and you start having to think about the public's perception and
yeah,
walk this tightrope between what you think is good and what you think is going to sell.
yeah,
And when you're a little kid, when you're making art, you're making art because it's playing, it feels good and it's fun. And I try not to lose that, but these grown up things, they bleed into your work, rent and bills and
yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like you have to walk that tightrope of like, who am I creating the work for? Is it for yourself or is it for other people? Yeah, and
Exactly.
it becomes a huge yeah, I guess as you said, like push and pull of like you have to kind of do a lot of evaluating and assessing and kind of figuring out like how you are creating work that is, gonna sell. You need it
Mm-hmm.
to sell, but also that
Yeah.
is gonna be fulfilling for you because at the end of the day, like you always hit a wall at some point. There's only so much of one thing you can do. And I'm kind of curious, like, what has been like the biggest change in your style that might have surprised even yourself?
Um, Biggest change in my style. Um, It'd probably be when I definitely got more abstract as the years went on. When I was a teenager and I was first developing the style, it was like fully formed little heads just pieced together next to each other, kind of like polka dots even.
Hmm.
Um, but when I was maybe in my 20s, I figured out how to weave them together, like for instance, like an eyebrow will also be a mouth, a nose will also be a chin, that kind of thing. So
Hmm.
it allowed me to weave and achieve this like um, this shifting perspective that it's honestly hard to like focus your eye on.
Hmm.
I think when I got to that, I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Um, yeah.
See, that is interesting because it's almost very like optical illusion, like whereas if you look at one thing, you think what you think you're looking at is something very different to also something else that you could be looking at. And I think I like that. I like this idea that not only is your work visually busy, but it's busy for a reason. It's like your work is very intentional.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of interesting to me. You're not creating work just to create work because it's going to look cool. It's like, well, actually, there's a reason that you put every line and every face in this particular piece of work in a certain way.
Yeah, every mark is highly intentional. It takes a very long time.
Absolutely. You can tell it does. And that's the interesting thing. And I kind of worry the fact that that is lost on people when they see your work on social media and they just scroll through it when they don't realize, oh, actually, this is taking 50 hours, not just,
Yeah.
it's a few lines on a piece of paper. It's actually like someone's dedicated their time to this, which is, I think that's about art in general, which is why I do this, is like, I think people gloss over the fact that people are making things. And it's not just a case of, oh, this looks pretty, or this is good, or this is bad. It's a case of like someone's taking their time to create this. Let's
Yeah.
explore it, as opposed to being like, oh, this is nice. I
Right.
think with somebody like yourself, because your work is so detailed, I personally do worry, like, are people going to understand the effort that's gone into this? So I don't know. I think that's a tricky line to balance as well, I think.
I think most people won't understand, but the people who you want to understand will.
Mm,
And those are the people that I try to reach, the people that, take a step closer and look at life and examine internally. And that is
yeah.
kind of what my art is about.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Like your audience will kind of reveal themselves to you in that sense. So like they'll step forward because you'll understand from the engagement you have or the conversations you have with people who's actually interested in your work and who just thinks it looks nice.
Hmm.
Because I think,
Yeah,
and actually, I guess there's a question to ask that I didn't put on this list, but like, is creating a beautiful image important to you?
it is. It is, but that's just one avenue that you can make. So, yeah, it's important to me, but there's also other things I would prefer to achieve with a work of art. Mainly moving someone emotionally or inspiring them. But I also want it to be, beauty, because I think it's even the simplest art. If it adds beauty into the world, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
if it's a kid's drawing on a fridge, it's a
All
good
right.
thing for the world.
So a lot of your work, not all, but a lot of it is monochromatic. Like, is there a
Yeah.
particular reason for that?
Um, I find that I'm able to achieve a level of complexity higher with black and white, just because color tends to it siphons your eye to it.
Mm,
So it's just a stylistic change, and I've been really into mixing both now styles.
mm. Yeah, because I think it's really interesting because you're right. It gives the work. The thing with black and white and creating monochromatic work, it gives the image a sense of both 3D-ness and also flatness at the same time. Because
Yeah.
depending obviously like shading and where you draw the lines and the angles of which the faces are, it kind of presents the work both as as like flat and three dimension at the same time. Like, is that something you ever think about?
Yes, absolutely. Like it's like the sensation of if you have a bird's eye view down at a pyramid,
Hmm.
it can either go in or it can go out
Yeah,
depending on what your brain is seeing.
yeah, and that's actually interesting because like obviously your work is very much in a way bird's eye view, but also at the same
Yeah,
time it's not. It's like one face might be facing one direction, but another might be facing a completely different direction. And it's like so
yeah,
like where's the center point of that image?
right. It's a anti-focal point.
Hmm. Yeah, like that's a really interesting way to look at it actually, and to kind of think about your work in terms of like who is the viewer in your work,
Right.
you know?
And that's just another thing that allows people to see something unique for themselves.
So your work is portraiture. I guess you could argue it's portraiture, but like,
Yeah.
how much do you consider the characters in the work? Like, are they certain kind of people? Are they based on people, or is it just from your imagination?
They're a lot of I mean mostly me. They're mostly myself, but
Ah,
they're also, like an emotional reflection to the world, to history, to certain topics. Whenever I'm working on a piece, I like to focus on like one topic. So I'll like listen to music or podcasts or history lessons about that topic and just let it bleed into the piece.
mm,
Um, and just see what happens. But it's simultaneously my reflection. Like these faces are my reaction to this information. If that makes sense.
ah. So your work is almost like a response to what you're listening to.
Yes, yeah. It's automatic art, so I try to channel while I'm making these topics,
Ah,
and they manifest themselves organically.
that's interesting. That's a really interesting way to consider not just the work itself, but just art making itself and mark making itself. In terms
Hmm.
of like, how do you let your external influences or what you're listening to currently bleed into the work without it being A, obvious, and B, also like about that topic specifically? That's actually a
Right.
really interesting way of doing it, actually. And the idea that like the faces are different like reactions, like that's such a cool idea. That's a really interesting idea, actually.
Thank
Um,
you.
because it
Yeah.
means that yeah, sorry, I was gonna say because it means as the artist, like your work is then extremely personal, and like you can go back and look at a piece of work and be like, oh, I remember what I was listening to, I remember what I was reacting to when I created this particular face or that particular face. That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah. I consider how I make my art. It's like part seance, part surgical operation, where I'm
Hmm.
so hyper focused on the material, but my mind is, channeling this energy that I am
Oh,
able to achieve for a certain amount of time,
that's
like a witch
such
doctor.
a cool way of putting it, actually. That's such a cool way because you're right, and it's kind of this really interesting blend of like really good technical precision and also just kind of letting yourself go at the same time.
Right. And
Mm.
I think you often see that, like a similar technique with like splatter art or just mark
Mm.
making and stuff. But I'm few people do it is in a tight way,
Yeah.
because I think it's hard to, stay hyper focused while channeling,
Mm.
a certain energy.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting 'cause your work it doesn't necessarily have a looseness about it, but I guess in many ways that's also what's interesting about the fact that when you're creating it, there's a looseness on your part, but the actual final result itself seems very, very, very kind of contrived and not contrived, but very considered because it's
Mhm.
very like just like detailed and specific and every line, as you said, is intentional. Yet the way it's created isn't always that. It's kind of like a really interesting, um, almost like an oxymoron, I think, in a way. Like
Yeah.
the way it's created versus the actual image itself. That's really interesting. That's really fascinating, that process.
Thank you.
So actually, I'm kind of curious about the intention of an image in terms of like, what is the starting point for an image?
The starting point is always one tiny face in the center. And so like the seance part of the piece is very fast. It's very loose. So I use like a 0.2 marker, and I just draw these faces really really fast, and just like there's a point where I run out of creative juice, and then like my brain isn't able to make faces, but
Hmm.
I don't know exactly when to tell. And so I'll like have this quick spasm of mapping out what the piece is going to look like, and then I go to the technical, the laborious part where it's just like dozens of hours of filling it and making it
Hmm.
look nice. And
Ah, see,
so
okay, that's interesting.
yeah,
Ah, that's interesting that you like, so basically you kind of start off improvising, then you map, then it goes intentional, and then
yeah,
it's like, that's a really interesting way to create as opposed to being like, okay, from the start, I know exactly what I'm doing. It's going to be like this, it's going to be like that. But I also think that's
mhm.
interesting the fact that you map it out first. Like, why do
Yeah.
you map it out? Would you never just kind of freestyle?
Well, it is freestyle, but it's like I don't use pencil or anything. It's just marker, so
Ah,
everything is final in that way. But
oh, yeah, I see.
it's like I'm just kind of flow. It's like a flow state
Hmm.
until I can't, and then I fill it, and then I step back. I look at the piece, and it's kind of like how a bird builds its nest, where like it'll put a twig here and then be like, oh, that's kind of out of balance, let me put a twig here.
Hmm.
Like then it builds out from the center like that, and after about 40-50 hours I have a piece that I feel is finished.
But I said, but when do you know a piece is finished? Or when do you feel like a piece is finished?
Purely instinctual. It's
Hmm.
just completely intuitive. And when I finish a piece, and I convince myself to stop fussing with it, I'll write my signature on the piece, and there's no arguing there. It's done.
And that's like the seal, the final seal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever looked back at a piece of work and been like, oh, actually, I've signed it, but it's not actually finished?
Yes.
And do you ever go back and change it, or do you? I'm
No,
leaving it now.
never.
Oh
Never.
wow.
No. I think it's a trap for artists to be obsessed with this concept of making something perfect,
Hmm.
because it's impossible. And sometimes if a piece isn't everything you want it to be, like it was just practice then,
Hmm.
so you just move on with your life.
Yeah, that's actually a really positive way to think about things, as opposed to being caught up in the fact that things aren't going the way you want them to go, or they're not, as you said, like perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is something that maybe is comes from a more traditional art education. Like you're you see all these Rembrandts and these Da Vinci's and stuff, and I think that concept of perfection as art is kind of ground into a lot of people's heads, and
Hmm.
they, I don't know. Nothing is perfect. There's no perfect.
I think also because, creating like a perfect rendering of, say, like a seascape or of a person, it's a huge technical achievement. I think
Mhm.
because of that, people want to be kind of, what's the word? They want to be revered because they've got a skill that other people don't always have. And I think that's probably where the perfection comes into a lot of people's work. Um,
Absolutely.
but then there are a lot of artists who are quite the opposite, who don't want their work to be perfect. So they'll be like, maybe more of like an abstract seascape artist or more of an abstract portrait artist. And personally, for me, that's a route that I personally prefer, just because it's nice to see people deconstructing imagery as opposed to making it perfect.
Right.
Because if we want to see a really nice seascape, we'll go to the sea, that kind of thing. Um,
Right.
but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the dynamic that a lot of artists probably had with the rise of the camera, and
Mm,
it's the same thing we're dealing now with the rise of AI. Is
yeah.
that you can just instantly create these things you want to see. But yeah, I think the imperfection is where the humanity of the artist comes in,
Mm.
and I think it gives an air of authenticity to the piece that I think people will start to crave, because not nobody wants everything to be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, what is your opinion on AI art, and how do you think it's going to affect like the art industry?
um, my opinion on AI art is it definitely freaked me out when I first saw it. But my main issue with it is that art is the thing that guides society, and society shapes itself around art.
Mm,
And if you
mm,
have something without human intentionality guiding art, you're having something without human intentionality guiding civilization, and what that civilization's morals are, and how to reflect it. And it becomes a cart leading the donkey scenario. And I think people need to consider a little bit more about what what they want society to reflect.
that's a really interesting way of putting it. Actually, I've never thought about it like that. Actually, but it's a really good point. It's a really good point, actually, because
Like,
yeah,
well, just like I love history, and while I'm drawing, I'm always listening to history. But like, there's a current of the stories that we tell people turning into real historical events, like the Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. Like that guided a lot of geopolitical events just because of people, trying to emulate it. Like
hmm,
there's no Alexander the Great without Achilles, and there's no Hitler without Alexander the Great. Like these things have reverberations, good and awful. So it's art does shape humanity in a magnitude that we can't even understand sometimes, even if it's little by little.
that's a good way to put it, because art is obviously and always the reflection of the person creating the work. So if somebody is creating the work without the human intervention, the
Yeah,
work itself is going to be quite hollow. It's not going to be about anything that's been experienced. It's about things that have been found online
exactly,
through other people's experiences. It's like a secondary existence almost, as opposed to being like a lived experience.
exactly. And art is a lived experience. Every piece of art has the life of the artist in it.
Mm, of course.
And I think
Yeah.
hollow is a good way to put AI art.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, like it looks fascinating and it's cool for now,
Yeah,
but I feel like it all kind of looks very similar. And I feel like the problem is that it's not quite the problem is not it's not perfect. It's not like, you put, wears into DALL-E and you come out with a beautifully rendered portrait. And I think
Hmm.
that's also the issue, is that it's not perfect, but it shouldn't be perfect. And because people want it to be perfect, it can't be perfect. It's a it's like a strange, weird kind of like vicious cycle loop thing where it's paradox, where it's like it's digitally generated. It's not going to be like what a human can do, but yet people want it to be like that. Just do it
Right.
yourself if you want it done. Simple as.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people say that, like, AI is good for people who never were able to make art, but I disagree with that. Like,
Mm.
everyone can make art.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
how you define it is different.
yeah. It's like, you apply yourself, like everything else in life. Like you apply yourself, you try, you practice, you
Hmm.
keep going at it. Whether you're good at it or not is not really for you to decide. It's probably more for other people to decide. But the idea is
Yeah.
that you do it, and if you're not willing to put the time and effort in, then you're not going to be an artist, then are you?
And
Um,
I think, I mean, when people are, playing around with AI, I think they're tasting a little bit of what a lot of artists get, is like, that rush of creativity. And it's like, you always had that inside you. You just believed that you didn't,
mm,
or maybe society told you that you didn't, but
yeah,
I believe every human being is capable of creativity.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's a really interesting way to put it. It's a really good outlook on AI, I think, actually. Very different to a lot of artists I've spoken to, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At first
pleasure.
I was angry, and then I was in despair. And then the more I think about it, the more I don't know. I'm at peace with it. I
Mm,
think people are going to want authentic art made by human beings
mm.
once AI gets stale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in many ways it already has, because like we know it exists and we're like, okay, cool. But I think the only problem now is that it's going to have people questioning what they're looking at, how real what they're looking at is real.
Yeah.
I think that's, particularly on social media, I think that's the issue we're going to have, is that, like, if somebody has spent 50 hours creating like a really nice drawing or a really beautiful painting, people are going to be like, oh, is that just where's the generator, or is that actually made by hand?
Yeah, I get
I think that's where the issue is going to lie. I think nowadays is that people who are not particularly educated on art won't know the difference, or they won't think about the difference, or they probably won't care about the difference either.
yeah. But I think it might end up being like, kind of like when movies became way too heavily laden with CGI, like after 30 Marvel movies, it's like, I just want like a movie with good dialogue, good writing,
Yeah,
like, people
yeah.
will crave authentic things.
Oh, yeah, completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about your creative process. Like, do you
Okay.
have any routines that you do to help you focus on creating your work?
Yeah, my routine's actually pretty intense. Uh, I used to have an issue with drugs and alcohol, and
Uh,
when I became an artist, I switched to more healthier habits. So I also have ADHD, so I have to manage it without medicine, because I had an issue with the medicine.
uh,
So I wake up, I run marathons. I'm running a marathon on
oh, wow.
Sunday.
No, I have so much respect for that. Like, that is not easy to do, because you're holding yourself accountable on many levels. Because it's not
Right.
just, having a nice, good lifestyle and it's not being healthy. It's also like you're also writing a novel, you're also an artist, you're also doing, many different things that require a lot of different areas of expertise and other different skills. And I have a
Mhm.
lot of respect for that. Also, it's kind of cool because you said when you're young you want to be a writer, and you are. Like, that's
Yeah.
also great. I think that's absolutely brilliant, because the fact that even though your art is going very well and you're finding success, you're not still giving up on other options and other kind of ways of enjoyment and dreams and goals you have. I think that's incredibly good. I think that's so good.
Thank you. Yeah, it was actually I was just kind of I don't know, just discouraged for about 10 years with writing. And when I turned 30, I was like, I don't care if I'm good or bad. I'm just going to chip away at this. And that's still in the stage where my drawing was when I was a kid, where it's like, I'm doing this just for the pure fun of creativity. Like, there's no monetary consideration. So it's like,
Mm,
I'm just making for the sake of making, and I'm enjoying it. And yeah, just little by little, it turned into a whole book. So
that's so
hopefully
good.
editing in 6 months.
But also the cool thing about that is that because with your art, you've been through this whole process first before, where you're
Yeah,
doing something for fun, it's cool, it's interesting, and you're like, oh, actually, now this is your career.
right.
With the writing, I think it's going to be a lot, not necessarily easier, but you know what you're doing with it now because it's like, okay, cool. And also, it's great that
Exactly.
you still have things you want to do just for fun. Because I think the one thing I say to a lot of people is this: you should always have one thing you do just for the pleasure of doing it. That doesn't involve you having to make money because we live in a society that tells you if you're not making money from something, then it's worthless, and that's never the case. I
Right.
always feel like that you need to be doing something creative, preferably that is bringing you just joy, just for the sake of doing it, because that's where you're going to understand yourself and discover yourself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're making money off everything you do constantly, which yeah is a great lifestyle, you're going to get burnt out because you've got to keep an eye on everything, and everything becomes work. And I feel like the
Yeah.
problem is that we don't have enough play, particularly as adults. And I think you have to maintain a really good balance of playing and working, without destroying yourself or negatively affecting your life.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, when I was doing a lot of drugs and stuff, like I thought that was like the key to productivity and
Hmm.
creation, but like it wasn't. It was the worst art I ever made. It was
Hmm.
worst writing I ever made, when I was on that stuff. But yeah, it's you I came to the conclusion that the only way to do it is the hard way. And
Yeah.
oh, I need to stick to this routine.
I think that's also a good point, though, because I think a lot of people sometimes feel like you have to be like in a certain mind state to create, or you have to be not even under the influence, but you have to have like a certain lifestyle, or you have to be sad to create, or the best work gets created from like maybe traumatic memories or whatever. And I feel like that's not always the case. That obviously
No,
will play a part. Your life will always play a part in your work, but I think
yeah,
having a routine that you're happy with and having a way of living that you're happy with and just being like a generally happy person will,
yeah,
I think, to be the best thing you could have for your art, because you're going to want to create. It's not like
yeah,
you have to feel like you need to create to be in a you need to be in a certain state to create. You want to create at any point because you're happy with the way you're living, if that makes sense.
absolutely. And I think it's really damaging, this proliferation of this mentally disturbed artist
Hmm.
is like, that's the true artist. I think a lot of young people see that, and they think that like they need to introduce chaos into their life to
Yeah.
validate themselves as an artist. And it the thing is like the way I see it is it's kind of brutal, but it's like other people deal with these same issues of like drug addiction and trauma and mental illness, and it's like, but they don't have a purpose necessarily. And myself, I do have a purpose that I gave myself, and I can either despair, alongside these people, or I can work to, improve my life.
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and it's I think it's damaging for people. Like when I was younger, I used to think Russ Thompson was the coolest dude in the world, but he was kind of a scumbag.
Hmm.
like he was just pure chaos. And it's like drugs and alcohol, they don't make you better at art. And that feeling that you get when you're making art like on drugs, it's a poor synthesization of the creativity that was already inside you.
Hmm.
You just need to learn how to access it.
Yeah. And with a healthier attitude and a more positive outlook, I guess, as well. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a really good point. And I think it's something that a lot of artists struggle with, to be honest.
Yeah.
Especially if, for instance, like their sales aren't good, or or especially if they see, I think particularly a lot of older artists, and I don't want to seem like ageist or disrespectful, but I think a lot of older artists sometimes feel a bit threatened or a bit uncertain of themselves when they see younger artists getting a lot of attention.
Hmm.
When somebody who's like 20 something fresh out of college has, just got their very first solo show, yet as an artist who maybe in their 50s has been slogging away at art for the last 30 years and never
Yeah.
had any of that success, I think it can be quite hard. But the same,
Absolutely.
but at the same time, I always feel like you have to remember, and every artist has to remember that everybody's journey is so different.
Yeah.
Like that's like somebody else's success is great and you should celebrate it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your life has in store for you. That's not what your journey necessarily is.
And I'm grateful that, I didn't get famous when I was 20. I'd be dead for sure.
Hmm. Yeah,
No doubt. But yeah, I feel like I'm more complete of a person, and because of that, I'm more complete of an artist now that I'm 30, that I've gone through some things.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to be because it's like you're content, and well, probably for the most part, you're content with the situation you're in, and I think that's a great place to be in life.
Right. And this was the goal, like I might not be the richest guy in the world, but like to live my days making art and living off my creativity and just being able to do that all day, like what I need to do to be happy. And I don't need to be on a yacht or live in a mansion.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm fulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely. Like most people who create art that I know of or that I speak to that or just I just typically know is the idea of being rich and famous and having a yacht and a mansion is not their end goal. Their end goal is to create, is to be able to sustain themselves and their life on creating work that they're passionate about.
Right. Yeah, I saw this good quote by Jerry Saltz,
Yes.
the art critic. He was like, behind every overnight success is decades of work. And I
Mm,
think that's lost on a lot of young artists,
mm,
because
absolutely.
like you want to be a rock star, but are you willing to labor in obscurity for 40 years? And you need to ask yourself that.
And sometimes I feel like obscurity can be the best thing for you to grow because you don't know
Mhm.
what you want to do straight away. You don't have any idea who you are straight away. You don't know. Sometimes you're not ready for the work you're creating yourself, and sometimes other people aren't ready for that work. And sometimes, as we said earlier, like having success too early can very much be a burden because, like, well, where do you go?
Right.
You don't want to be like right at the gates, have every show under the sun, and then fade into obscurity and not be able to see your work again. You want to be able to like have maybe not the best, most lucrative careers, but a career that lasts for decades. You're not
Right.
here for a short time; you're here for a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of countries, they don't see it as a career, and that's the
Mm,
issue. Like
mm,
it's either you make it or you don't, and
yeah.
or it's like but the truth is it's just this goal that you slowly work towards for years and years and
Oh
years,
yeah.
and it grows, and you're not going to know what it's going to look like in years. You
Yeah.
just keep
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's particularly new artists. I think they forget that, particularly in the dawn of social media. Like you're not going to be famous overnight, and if you are, it might not be the best thing for you.
right.
But at the same time, like, I think you're right. As long as you remember it's a lifelong career, and you're satisfied with what you're creating, and
Hmm.
you're able to sustain yourself, whether that's with a part-time job or not. I think that's good enough at the end of the day. That you don't have to be a full-time artist. You don't have to be making millions from your work. As long as you are happy and you have all your bills and stuff paid, everything else is a luxury. End of the day.
Right. And I think social media is often very misleading about that point,
Mm.
because it's it's the difference between attention and legacy. And I
Oh yeah,
think you get you can get millions and millions of views overnight, and you think your life's going to change, but then the world just kind of moves on from you. Like any of these like flavor of the month people, like the Island Boys, like the world would just
yeah,
get because this cool little thing that you did, there wasn't much content there.
Hmm.
So I think you should focus. One artist he I was talking to, he had a really good point. He said, "Don't rush to be seen. Take your time to be remembered."
Oh,
And
that's good. That
I think it's great.
it's also really true. Actually, what are your thoughts on social media and how has it impacted your practice? Like especially Reddit of all places.
Yeah, yeah, it's critical. It's entirely critical. If you want to live off your work, you just need to put it in front of as many people as you can. Um, as long as you don't let it, devolve because of that reflection. Like I know a lot of artists that they're better influencers than artists,
Hmm.
but I think that can lead to like a hollow feeling inside of you as an artist. So I've always struggled to maintain my own style, even at my own detriment, I think sometimes. But yeah, I first blew up on Reddit, and that was huge for me. But another thing about going viral is it it can be cold, like you can have millions of views overnight, and then you think everything in your life is going to change, and then it just goes back to the same old next week.
Mm.
So like it can be very destabilizing mentally to
Yeah.
artists, and for myself for sure. Like, you have one viral post a month and you're like, oh, everything's going to change, I'm not going to have to worry about rent anymore, and then the next 4 weeks it's all back to normal. But no, I think it's a huge tool that people should use, and they should not be afraid to put themselves out there.
I think also the problem with going viral, now you just said that, is that like you have to sustain that. Then you put pressure on yourself to have to sustain that. You're like, okay, what I'm going to do next is going to go viral. Or it becomes
Right.
almost like a hamster wheel of like having to always try to create the next biggest, better thing that's going to make your work even better than it was last time.
Yeah, and that's something I struggle with just needing to produce content.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, that's the question I wanted to ask you. I don't know if I put it on here, but like, is there a difference between being an artist and being a content creator?
No, because I think they pull from that same source that is inside all people. It's just creativity, and I think art manifests in far more things than just paint on canvas. It can manifest in any single thing, even just the way you live your life. It can be creative. I think so. My issue with AI is that my same issue with social media algorithms is that people are changing their behavior to appease this algorithm.
Yeah.
So that's where the authenticity is lost, and it's like you're just following trends, but you haven't created any. And as an artist, you should be trying to create some instead of just mimicking them. And it's like you're now the hamster hitting the button for a little dopamine hit. So yeah, I think algorithm chasing is dangerous for sure as an artist.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I also feel like a lot of people feel pressured into being like, oh, I need to, dance with my images, or I need to like, use this trending audio or whatever. When it's like, actually, you could easily create as an artist some trending audio. Or like for
Yeah,
me personally, I love seeing reels from artists that talk about their work as opposed to like, so I love seeing people's work, but I love knowing about the work itself. Like showing me an
yeah,
image of your work is great. It's cool. But I personally, just me as an adult, I want to know about the work. That's why I'm here. I'm not here just to look at beautiful images. I'm here to know about what you're creating. And for me,
right.
like I feel like personally for me, and the content that I really like, that I've really engaged with, is when I see like an artist talk about themselves and their work and how they created the work or why they created the work or what the work means. And I feel like we just don't really see a lot of that. I just see a lot of, oh, this is a trending audio. Let's stick this on
Yeah,
a slideshow of my images. You
and I
know?
do that. I literally do that. So I can talk smack right now, but like I currently have a trending audio slideshow of images going viral on TikTok as we speak. So like
But
it,
the
it
thing,
it's a dynamic inside of myself that is always struggling. It's doing the cringy things because I need to.
like the thing is, like I don't want to hate on it because I'm not part of that world as of yet. Um, and it's not something that I personally ever feel the pressure or the need to do. Like I'm happy to, if nobody listens to the podcast ever, I'm fine with that. I get enough enjoyment out of doing it. I get to talk to cool people. It's fine for me. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I also understand like you play to the algorithm because you want to be seen. You want people to understand your work and get to know you. And then from there, hopefully the right kind of people will buy a piece or they'll inquire further. It's like social media is just the surface. Social media is the tip of the iceberg, and
Yeah,
you want but you want your followers and the viewers to really get to the bottom of the iceberg. I think that's a
yeah,
problem people forget. Like social media is not everything. Social media
yeah,
is just the leading line to like sales or to your website or to the actual artist, you as a person. And I think the
absolutely.
problem I see with a lot of artists personally, and a lot of people I talk to, is that they don't want to put themselves out there. They just want to put their work out there. But the problem is that we live in a society where you are part of your work. Your work is part of you. You have to put yourself out there if you want people to interact. Because we need a face behind the name, behind the images. And is that
Yeah,
something you've ever struggled with yourself?
yeah, definitely. Because I am a shy person. I'm an introverted person. I can't look at myself and talk. Like I'm struggling right now on Zoom.
Oh,
It's but yeah, no, that's something that I've really struggled with. What's interesting is I got so much success from Reddit that like Reddit, the company itself, started reaching out to me with
wow.
these different programs. And one of the programs, it was shut down, but it was because they lost some employees. But I was selected to be among 50 content creators that was there. It was like influencer school. It was very very interesting. They selected these 5 people from Reddit because they're internally they were like, we don't have influencers like Instagram or TikTok have. So we're going to find these creative people, and then we're going to have like this 6-week course where we teach them on how to
Oh,
emulate viral trends and things. And a lot of the homework they were giving us I really didn't want to do because I was like, I'm just not comfortable with some of this stuff, like
hmm.
this isn't my authentic self. But it was helpful in a lot of ways. But yeah, there are people who dedicate their life to study these trends. But it's like the dynamic of action without analysis. Sometimes you can do something just because you can do it, but you should maybe consider why you're doing it.
Okay, absolutely. I think that's also part of the problem with art being so accessible sometimes. You can't gatekeep it, but the problem is that people can just throw really cool images that they've created, within 2 minutes without thinking about it online, and
Yeah.
it could possibly go viral and it could possibly make them a career. Whereas then you have
Yeah.
artists who have sat down and really kind of analyze themselves and have something they actually want to say with their work never be
Yeah.
discovered.
Right. That's the majority of them.
Hmm.
That's what's that's the hardest thing about pursuing a career in art is like you just keep going when you see people that are better than you,
Yeah.
lose faith and give up. And I think a lot of people, they just fall into obscurity because that's life, but they're still artists and they're
Hmm.
still genuine. Like some of my favorite artists in the world, they're not big names. They're people I know personally and
Yeah.
whose work inspires me and their life connected to the work inspires me. And one person in particular who I think struggles with putting herself out there is my aunt Joni Riccardi. I'm giving her a shout out.
Yeah.
She's like one of the best artists I've ever met in my entire life. When I was 6 years old, she brought me to New York City and showed me all these galleries, and it completely blew me away. And I think it is the reason I'm an artist. And her work is just astounding, but she just won't put herself out there.
But why though?
I think it's I don't know. I don't know. It's I don't know. I just yell at her every time I see her because she doesn't there's no logical reason for why she should hide that art from the world. It's
Maybe she's
incredible.
actually just scared of the success, the potential success.
Maybe because like she literally hangs out with famous artists. Like she
Hmm.
knows them. Like they look at her work and they yell at her too. And I'm like, come on.
I think that's kind of like the biggest shame because it's not about being famous and it's not about having the most followers. It's just about sharing your life with the world
Yeah.
for the most part. It's not even about wanting to be known. It's just about like, the community that comes from art. And it's about the conversation that comes from art more than, the shallow factors of like numbers and whatever. I think that's
Yeah.
like having done this for a long time, or at least a decent amount of time, enough over time. Like the one thing that I value is the conversation around art. Like people just need to talk a bit more. Like art isn't just there just to be viewed and admired. It's also there to be spoken about. It's also there like every piece of art means something, and every piece of art, but there's a conversation behind every piece of art. And I think the problem I have with a lot of society nowadays is that that's not really explored or it's not really considered by a lot of people. They just look at an image and be like, oh, this is nice, this is not, this is worth liking, this is not. And it's like,
Yeah.
but there's so much more to a piece of art. And it's like, if your aunt doesn't want to put her work out into the world, fair enough, that's her decision. But like, imagine the lives she could change just for
Yeah.
people, for just from people seeing her work. And that probably sounds dramatic, but it's really not. Like,
No.
the amount that art can change somebody's life, or the amount that a single image can impact somebody. Like, everybody's been inspired from somewhere. And if the person that you weren't inspired by hadn't created that work and put it out there, you never would have inspired yourself. So I think it's a great thing that she it's a great thing that she wants to keep it for herself, because there's a beauty in that also. But I think it would be great if she kind of just let go of her inhibitions and just kind of put it out into the world and, try it for 3 months, 6 months, see how it feels. If it doesn't feel right, then bring it back in. Simple as. It doesn't have to be a
Absolutely.
permanent thing. It doesn't have to be forever.
Yeah, and my entire approach to art is because of reverberations. Like
Hmm.
I
Oh, which player?
like what you said. Like you don't know how one piece of art is going to affect someone, but they do, and they continue to affect them for the rest of their
Absolutely.
life. And like my art is, I like to create these objects that generate awe and inspiration every day,
Yeah.
and the more of those objects that I put into the world, the more I'm generating this awe and inspiration. And when someone takes awe and inspiration into their life, like it carries through their life, it changes their day, it affects them, and it can spark ideas that then have countless reverberations in themselves. So it is my way of trying to use my life to impact the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's such a great way to put it. Such a way to think about it as well, because it means that you're doing something that has a purpose to you. I think that's important, because I think a lot of people will tell you that art isn't purposeful. There's no value in it.
Right. Yeah, it's yeah, because people, they equate money to
Hmm.
value. And,
Yeah. And that's not always the case. I feel like, as I said earlier, that's not always the case at all. I think it's important to do something that you don't make money off, just for pure
right.
enjoyment. Because, like, why would you not want to? It. I don't know. I think it's such a shame that we live in such a commercial society where, like, and even conversations I have with work colleagues, when I tell them I have a podcast, and they're like, "Oh, how much money do you make?" And I say, "I don't make all that much money." They're like, "Well, why do you do it then?" And it's like, because it's the time you spend doing something that you enjoy. It means that
Absolutely.
it's a purpose. It's a reason for me to really kind of get to know people and to kind of sit down and it does more for me than it will do for anybody else, and that's the whole point.
Right.
Same as creativity, it does more for the person creating than anybody else. Otherwise, you wouldn't be creating it.
Right. Absolutely.
So I also want to get into asking you about exhibiting, because you've had a pretty prolific kind of exhibiting career so far, which is pretty extraordinary, actually, considering you've only been asked for full time for 3 years. That's pretty cool. So, like, what, like, how did you get into exhibiting work, and kind of like, where did the kind of impetus for this come from?
Just aggressive self promotion.
Hmm.
Google. I would just Google every single gallery near me, every head shop, every tattoo parlor, like anywhere that would let me put my art up. I would reach out to them, and no matter how small, no matter how big, I would reach out. Like, I'll reach out to. I've probably emailed the Guggenheim, and the same day
Hmm.
I've emailed like a tattoo parlor in Albany, New York. Like I will. I'm very aggressive with it. And I've introduced myself to as many people as I can, like in the art world. And even if they say no off the bat, like my name is now in their ears, and
Hmm.
a lot of them will reach out later on and be like, "Hey, I have this opening. You still into this?" So I actually have an art show tonight. It's an art fair in DC.
Perfect.
I have a wall that I've done, and then I put up some pieces in a record store last night.
Oh wow, so also that's interesting, because the environments in which your work is seen are so different. So it
Yeah,
must, like, I wonder, does it ever affect like the viewing or the reading of your work if it's in a different environment?
probably. If people did the math or did the investigation, like if I just show you my resume,
Hmm.
it looks pretty impressive. But like, not all of these places are white wall
Yeah.
situations. They're basements and back
Hmm.
alley stuff. But like, it's still a gallery, and it's still a place where people come in and just to look at art. And
It's a really
it's
good point though, because it doesn't need to be white walls. Like, a
no,
gallery space isn't just white walls. This gallery space can be literally anywhere that you can hang your work up.
Yeah,
And it
and
doesn't have to.
it led
Yeah,
to white walls.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always have to. It doesn't always have to. At least at the start, I guess. Or even not. But it doesn't always have to be an official white wall gallery space thing with an opening reception. It could be, and in fact, it might be a lot more fun and a lot more kind of interesting if it wasn't, because as I said earlier, like the way in which your work is read is going to be changed by the environment it's in. And it's like if your work is, really busy, how would having your work in a really busy environment affect the reading as opposed to like white walls? To be fair, like a white wall gallery would probably be like the best way to view your work because it is so busy. But then it's
Mhm.
also like how would other busier environments then take away or add to the work itself? Like how would like background noise off a city street add to the images themselves? Or how would
Yeah.
having your work in the back room of an electronics store where TVs are on affect the work?
Yeah. It does. It does. I just wanted to point out I'm having another participant in this art show is another guest of yours, Sarah Jameson.
Ah,
So
Sarah, the lovely
two
Sarah
of two of
Jameson.
your guests will be in the same show tonight.
That's so cool. Sarah, her work is gorgeous, and just
She's incredible.
again, like your work, it's so detailed that I worry: will people understand the time and effort that's gone into it? Because it's not just this is a nice image. Because her work is very like pretty.
Mhm.
It's I personally, for me, I'd hate for people to gloss over any art that just looks pretty, when actually it's like highly damn detailed and it's taken ages and it's a skill.
Yeah.
But her work is gorgeous as well, and also the size of it is just brilliant because it's quite small, and you're like, wow,
Yeah.
that amount of detail in such a small space is incredible.
They're astounding. So actually, I had been a full-time artist for 6 months, but when I met her, and up until that point, I was the first full-time artist I had ever known.
Wow.
And so just knowing that they exist in the wild, I was like, this is incredible. Like I was so excited to meet her and talk to her about it.
And also, she's lovely in terms of like she'll talk to you, and I have so much respect for artists who actually want to talk, because a lot of artists are quite secretive, and especially if they're full time or they'll like it's like a lot of the kind of influencer artists that I see who have like, oh, they're like buy my workshop or buy my what's the word, buy my class or buy my or pay for this class and I'll teach you how to create art. And it's like, yeah, but I'm not saying you should give all your seekers away for free, because you have to make money. I respect the hustle, but it's kind of like, should you be monetizing that? You're creating work. There's something about it for me personally that I don't always see eye to eye with. But then the other artists that I look at and I'm like, you need to be teaching people how to do what you do if you want to, because your work is so damn incredible. You should be paid for it. So I guess it's kind of swings and roundabouts. But I don't know. For me, I think the whole artist turned education or to artist turned teacher, I don't know how I feel about it fully. I'm always a bit dubious, if I'm honest. But then again, people have skills and talents. Why would you not want to monetize them? I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of hustles in the art world for sure. There's a lot. But what were you gonna say?
I was going to say, do you have any advice for people who might be looking to exhibit their work?
You mean pursuing art?
Yes, or pursuing to exhibit their work. So the people who want to exhibit their work.
To exhibit. Yeah. Just reach out. Just reach out to people. Cold call them, cold email them, message them on Instagram. You can't have shame, because like you need to ask yourself, like, are you going to feel worse if this person is annoyed with you and kind of like a little snarky, or are you going to feel worse, just regretting that you never went for it? And you're always going to feel worse regretting that you never went for it. And like some of these people who are like, back in the day when I reached out to them, they were like, okay, Skippy, like calm down, like I'll think about it. And like a couple years later, they reach out to me and they're like, hey, are you still interested? And it's like, okay, it worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe I was a little annoying at first, but that's all I wanted was an opportunity to put my art on the wall.
That's true. And also the worst thing they can do is say no. Worst thing they're gonna do.
Yeah, nothing. They're gonna just they're not gonna respond to my Instagram message.
Yeah. And then your life is going to be exactly the same as it was before you sent the message. So you have nothing to lose at the end of the day.
Right. And same thing with social media. Like, you're going to get nasty comments. And like, are those the deterrent that are going to keep you from your purpose and what you want to do with your life, like, no, just ignore them.
Yeah, that's so true as well. Because I think that's the thing as well. I think maybe we don't talk about it often enough, but like social media can also be quite a harsh place. And I feel like
Yeah.
as an artist who's constantly evolving or whose work is always changing, or just as a person the way you're always changing, like it's hard because you're your own worst critic. But to have other
Mhm.
people amplify that for you can be quite soul destroying. But at the same time, you're right. You have to also be like, well, actually, I'm doing this for a reason, and kind of stick to that. You
Yeah.
know, because most of the people who aren't in the art field, who leave such messages of like, oh, this is an art or whatever, and it's like, well, actually, they don't have your perspective of like to really be able to say that with full clarity.
Right. I've gotten to the point where I allocate zero brain space for it.
The best thing to
I
do.
just, the sooner I forget them, the better. So I don't engage in any nasty comments.
Yeah, and particularly like when it comes to like,
You forget.
sorry, say it.
I will forget. That's the thing. Is like
Yeah.
I could be mad for a day, or I could just forget a day quicker.
Yeah, and just getting on with building up your legacy and moving on to the next thing you've got to do because you're busy because you've got things to do.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Exactly.
Like if you're as an artist, especially, you're always working. So rather than focus your energy on something negative that someone said, just focus on being positive and working towards the dream because that's the thing that's going to get you there at the end of
Yeah.
the day. Which is sometimes easier said than done, but that's true. Though the thing that's going to get you there is your own work, and your own ethic, and your own
Mm-hmm.
heart, your own energy.
It's a
Really,
marathon. Yeah.
it very much is, and I think people forget that really easily. They think, "Oh no, it's good," And I think the thing that I find really hard to hear or to hard to talk to artists about is that when you can tell they're not doing well because they're not having sales, and they feel very like they're feeling down about their own work, and it's hard because I know some damn great artists who deserve success, but the numbers just aren't there or the engagement's not there.
Yeah.
And it can be hard because it's hard to try to tell people like that your time will come. You just have to wait. You have to be patient. You have to work because that
Yeah.
you can see them working hard enough, but it's also like you have to remember like people need encouragement, and it's true. You have to just patience is such a huge part of it. It's not all about creating. It's also about patience and about marketing and about working towards the goal, not trying to achieve the goal.
Yes. Absolutely. And developing the skill to weather the harsh weather.
Yes. And also, I also feel like with a lot of artists, like not jumping into full art, like being a full-time artist too soon. I think a lot of people are in a rush to want to be full-time artists straight away off the bat. And it's like,
Yeah.
have yourself, like personally for me, just from my knowledge of the people I speak to, is like, have yourself enough of, enough savings or enough of a nest egg that you can actually afford to do art full time first before trying it. So I feel like a lot of artists I know have just jumped straight ahead and quit their jobs and are like, I'm going to make it. And it's like, that's
Yeah.
just not the reality. Particularly nowadays with social media, it's not just reality. Maybe 5, 10 years ago, it would have been different, but now it's not the same reality. You can't
Mhm.
just make money straight away like that, unless you're, Jeff Koons or whatever. But even he
Right.
started from somewhere. So
Exactly.
I think the biggest advice I give to a lot of artists is that like being a full-time artist is everybody's dream. Is what you love to do. You love to be able to live and just create art, which is also not just what you do, but it's like you don't always have to do that. That's not the only road. You can have a part-time job and still create art. Granted, it won't be
Yeah.
the same, but it might be easier on you.
Yeah. And it's a business. So it's like you
Yeah,
wouldn't open a coffee shop without enough money to buy coffee.
yeah,
So like you
exactly,
need to take these considerations in before you take the leap.
exactly. I just know quite a lot of artists actually who on social media and on the surface, they look like they're doing fantastic. They look like they're, really killing it and they're, really quote unquote successful. But, because I'm friends with people like behind the scenes, yeah, they're good. They're great. They're doing well, but they're not doing that great. Finances are not always there. And, there's a lot of stress and pressure. And
Yeah,
it
that is me.
takes, oh, there you go. But it takes somebody very kind of strong not to break under that pressure because,
Yeah.
you know, social media is very illusionary. Everybody's doing well. When
Mhm.
actually, I'd say maybe like 3%, if you're lucky, of people are actually doing well. And also, I
Right.
think actually not really. I think because the people who are doing well aren't even on social media because they're enjoying their lives, you know? So I kind of feel like it's very illusionary to me. It's something that I try to be very mindful of when I'm online. And you see people
Right.
doing really well and you see people, having a lot of fun. It's like, are you really? And maybe that's just me being very like, suspicious.
No, it's true though, because with artists, like we also have to fake it till we make it. And
Of course.
like you don't want these white wall galleries to know that you haven't sold an original in months. Like
Hmm.
it's so yeah, I definitely do commit a little bit of that. Like I can have a million shows lined up, but if I'm not selling anything at these shows, I'm not going to advertise that.
Of course. Absolutely. And I think it's kind of a shame because even these galleries are aware of the state of the world. They're aware
Yeah.
that it's not as easy for artists just to sell work like that. It doesn't work in the same way anymore like it did 5, 10 years ago. So it's like it's a shame that there is a pressure there to be like that because it can be quite damaging, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So what has creating art taught you about yourself?
That's a very good question. Um, there's aspects of myself that I definitely am not aware of during, the regular waking hours, that I am able to plumb forward from the depths when I'm making art, like certain feelings, certain beliefs. And I think only through the act of going internal for dozens of hours am I able to figure these things out about myself. And and making art is, for me, is this very personal, exploration, and it's this inward place that you go, and there's all sorts of things to discover
Yeah,
down there.
that's so cool. It's interesting though because it's like you don't often think about like what your work teaches you just because you're creating it. You're very busy creating it. You don't
Yeah,
necessarily think about yourself through your work and how you've seen through your work. Um, so actually, that's the question because it's cool.
it's a
So I,
cool question. Yeah.
I have a question for you from the last artist I interviewed. It's changed since I sent you the interview notes because I've interviewed people since then. An artist called Jenny Lloyd, a really cool collage artist. I've just finished editing her interview. Actually, I'm about to render it. I'm going to render it after this, which is perfect. So I'll probably have this done. Hopefully, I'm hoping tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. Um, but her question for you is, it's a kind of a two-part question. Is are you a person who has a million different ideas? And if so, how do you choose one idea to pursue? If not, how does that hyperfocus benefit you?
Yeah, so I am the kind of person with a million ideas, but when I select one, I go all in, and I dedicate my hyper focus into that, and I just cut out those old ideas,
Hmm.
because at that point, in that stage of development, they are nothing but baggage. So
Hmm.
like, I would like to just drill myself forward in that particular direction that I've selected.
But how do you choose an idea?
I mean, there's logic, but a huge part of my process is just intuition. It's just
Hmm.
a gut feeling, a gut instinct, and I'll go with that. I've made major life decisions on gut instincts.
Fair enough.
Uh,
Like, do you ever keep like a sketchbook or kind of like words or phrases or topics of particular interest to you that you want to create work about?
I don't keep sketchbooks, but I do have just like scattered notes
Hmm.
around,
Yeah.
little scraps of paper. I'll just write an interesting idea and then
Hmm.
keep them around. Usually, I lose them before I use them.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, because I kind of feel like you'd be the kind of artist who doesn't keep a sketchbook, but also does generate a lot of ideas. But also, you want to save the ideas, but also it's interesting because you're also, I imagine, the artist that actually doesn't mind losing ideas because you're going to have plenty more, and you're
Right.
always inspired to create something new. Like an image you created, today is going to impact, the next 10 images you create, and they're going to impact the next 10. So it's like you'll never run out of ideas because your work is so complex, and it's
Mm.
a natural progression from where you've started. So it's kind of really exciting.
I always start with a blank mind too. I never know what I'm going to make
Oh
until
wow.
I'm so that is another thing that helps me. I discover what the piece is about as I'm making it.
Oh. That's nice because it's like you surprise yourself then.
Yeah. So that's, I think, part of the reason that allows me to stay hyper focused on it is because it is a discovery, and the longer I work on it, the more I uncover.
Yeah, because a lot of time to dedicate to one image or just to anything, you know.
Yeah.
So like it has to have a value to you as a person creating it just through the amount of time you're spending on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And actually, although this is not where I wanted this question to be in this conversation, but how do you choose a pricing for your work then? Because your work takes such a long time to create.
Um, it's hours times my feelings toward it.
Hmm.
Not everything that I've put a million hours into is my gonna be the highest priced
Yeah,
thing. Um, but some pieces just have this like current that run through it that it just grips me. So those are the pieces that I cherish.
so how do you try, and I forgot to ask this question earlier, but how do you make your work affordable for everybody? Or do you prefer for your work to only be affordable to certain people?
Um, I try to hit different price points because I think it's critical for when you start as an artist to be able to be affordable by your friends and family. And
Yeah,
so I'm big on t-shirts. I'll always sell t-shirts just because, every human being on the planet owns a t-shirt, and I try to keep them affordable. I sell prints, but my originals are, they're rare, so I do
yeah,
price them out, and like each piece is like a week or two of labor, so I need
of
to
course. Yeah.
factor that.
Yeah, and also they're originals, they're not going to be replicated. You're paying
Exactly.
for that exclusivity. That's the whole reason you're paying a lot more money. But that's really cool.
Right.
That's really interesting, actually. I think that's a great way to view your work, particularly keeping it affordable in like t-shirts and stuff. Because the cool thing about your work is that there are so many different aspects in which you could lead into, like like wallpaper or gift wrap or like different things if you wanted to go into that.
Hmm.
Whether you do or don't is your own, your own feelings. But it's kind of interesting that sometimes the commercialization of your work isn't actually a bad thing if the work can lend itself well to that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it also just helps grow your name very
mm.
simply. Like
Yeah,
each thing you put out there, it's brand recognition. There's a You can find weed jars in New York and Vermont with my art on it. You can
oh, wow,
find coffee with my art on it in New York.
that's cool. So
Um,
that's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, because it makes me kind of think about like how you display your work in a gallery in like a different way, or like it'd be really cool to walk into a white gallery setting and all of the walls are just your work. Like that'd
Yeah.
be really cool. Like something like that would be great. Or I don't know, it's just really interesting because your work is so detailed. You need somewhere, I would say you need somewhere like big to show it, but then it's like, how do you fill that space with the work? You know,
Hmm.
because it might not just be necessarily on the wall itself. It could be, interactive in some kind of way. It could be, within the room itself. I don't know.
Um,
There's a lot of
did you see my
possibilities.
wallpaper?
I have not seen your wallpaper, no.
Yeah, yeah, it's something I've been doing since my art's so small and detailed.
Yeah.
I figured out a method to create to turn my ink into wallpaper that doesn't repeat. And so yeah, I've done a couple installations where it's the entire floors.
Oh, that's
Wall.
beautiful. That's
I
so beautiful.
actually in my corner I just bought 480 square feet of it. I had a few venues lined up, but they fell through. So I've been desperately trying to seek someone because I spent way too much money on this, but I love doing installations because it's a full experience for people.
But what could be a really interesting idea, just throwing it out there, is that if you cut that wallpaper into like A4, A5, A3 pieces of like paper, quote unquote paper, and then gave them to artists to use as a base for their own work and create like a collaborative project, that could be interesting. Like
Yeah,
something like that.
that could
Or
be
like,
interesting.
or how you can repurpose that for like, something else or something different. Like maybe you want to cut up and recreate the work in a more of a collage idea, or like maybe it might give you the ability to create with a different medium or in a different style or with something slightly different, or maybe like more three-dimensional or something like that.
Yeah,
Maybe, you know.
I uh, I've reached out to a few places. I've been trying to convince the city of DC to let me do bus wraps, like public buses
Wow, that'd be
wrapped,
so good.
garbage trucks or rubbish trucks, and yeah, I was reaching out to this one. Some artists I know in DC do this. They sell their designs to this like car club. So these sports car guys,
Oh,
they'll wrap their cars in the art, and then I'm the kind of artist that like I'll do things just because they're cool, and I'll always lose money on it. But
hmm.
yeah, it's just something I want to see.
Because granted, if you can afford to lose some money, great. In the sense of like that's cool. It's not a bad thing to do, but it's also like the experience and exposure you could get from it, or like just the experience of it, and the
Yeah,
fact that it exists in the world. That is really cool, and it also, as we said earlier, you don't know who's going to see that or what you're going to gain from that. There is an
exactly.
artist that I interviewed years ago, interview number 3, Tom Lohner, who is an incredible example of this. Like he's the kind of artist who has his work on the side of trains, embedded into
Hmm.
tables. He does a lot of like brand promotion for like alcoholic drinks and stuff. I'll send you
Hmm.
a link to his work. He'd be somebody that I'd advise you to reach out to because he's very personal, he's very extroverted. He's really,
Yeah,
really, really, really good at finding the balance between creating really cool, amazing, stylistic work, but also very brandable and also very commercial work.
right.
I think he's the kind of artist that I feel like everybody should be keeping an eye on, just purely for like just the amount of stuff he's done. That's just incredible. And every single time I look at his work again, or I visit his Instagram, he's just doing something else that's amazing. And you're just like, how are you getting all of this kind of exposure and all of these interesting opportunities? But it's because of hard work, because he's put the effort in, and he has a family, so it's like even more respect. Like you're not just by yourself; it's like you're also supporting people doing this. It's quite insane. But
Yeah, it's
I'll
awesome.
send you a link to his work. Somebody I would
Thank you.
highly recommend you to talk to because I feel
No,
like
I'll reach out to
actually,
him.
I feel like that's exactly what you need is just like that work, like a little bit more kind of like national, worldwide exposure for like bigger, better, interesting, commercial projects that your work could
Yeah,
really lend well into. I think that'd be such a good thing for you. Yeah,
I love it.
I'll send it to you after this. Um,
Because I also like I don't think it cheapens the art. Like I know a lot of artists might have some qualms about putting their art on merchandise, but like if I sell, a beer can with my art on it and someone has an intimate moment, staring at it, like to me that's still a success.
oh
That's
yeah,
as good as walking into a gallery and seeing the same exact image on the wall. Like I don't think it lessens it.
I think also in this society you need to have different streams of revenue as an artist. You can't just focus on, oh, I'm just going to sell prints because if people aren't buying it, then what are you going to do? You know,
Absolutely.
you know, diversifying your work and diversifying the client base and your audience is extremely important. Um,
100%.
but that's just some artists don't want to do that though, and I can understand that. But it's also like then be prepared to really push your work and push your prints onto people.
Yeah.
So, do you have a question for the next artist I interview?
The question I have for the next artist is what do they perceive the reverberations of their art to be
Oh,
and how it would shape the world
I
in
see.
in 100 years?
How will it shape? How will it shape the world?
Yeah.
It shape the world. How will it shape the world in 100 years?
Yeah.
That's a great question. That's a really good question. Right. So I had a conversation with a really good artist friend called Brian Dean Haas, and we're talking about the idea of skill and personality in art. And as an artist, like which is more important? So the question for you is, which is more important, the skill of the artist or the personality of the artist?
I don't I might swap out personality with
Hmm.
character
Hmm.
because
Okay.
I think it requires a lot of character that, is built, intentionally throughout your life to be a success as an artist, even if you're the most skilled person in the world. If you crumble at the first, adversity you face, your talent doesn't matter for much.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I would say character.
Fair enough. And it's a great answer as well, actually, because you're right. Like the problem is it's a tricky question, I think, because it's like they kind of go hand in hand and you kind of need a bit of both, or you need nowadays you kind of need maybe more personality, but you're right in terms of like, well, actually, you need to know who you are, or you need to be able to at least, weather anything that's going to come your way before you can actually create the work. You need to have that kind of strength within yourself to be able to
Right.
to not stress and be be afraid that the money's not rolling in or whatever. You have to have that determination within yourself first before you can create anything, and then you
Absolutely.
creating comes next.
Yeah.
It's a good response. So
Thank you.
what does it mean to be a successful artist?
To me, it's just finding fulfillment in what you do, um, and what fulfills you fulfillment can come from anything, but I think for most artists, it's just creating art, having a roof over your head, a supportive network of friends and family, and that's it. I
Yeah.
don't think it's maybe headlining Art Basel or whatever.
Yeah. So how do you measure the success of your own work?
I got a nice apartment. I got a lovely girlfriend. I got a nice family, niece and nephews. I'm good.
Yeah.
And I'm able to keep, living off my creativity, and I don't have to hack stumps up in Washington D.C. for minimum wage anymore. So I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So what impact do you hope that your work has? What is the ideal response from the viewer?
I want people to look closer at the art, and in doing so, look closer at a reflection of themselves, and then spend a little time going inward and diving deeper into themselves, because I think that will impact how they navigate the world.
Yeah. See, I love the fact that you're achieving positivity through your work. It's not about anything negative, or it's not about kind of being self-centered. It's about being like actually just kind of look inward a bit. It might be quite nice. I like that, and that's so valuable actually, though, I think, to be honest, because it's not just shallow, and it's not a glossy exterior of it being like, oh, this is just a really nice image, I buy my talent. It's like, well, actually, let's dive a bit deeper into this. I think I have a lot of respect for art that does that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think people contain a multitude of contradictions, and I think if you spend a little bit more time reflecting on who you are, then you can look at the world with a little bit more compassion and grace, and figure yourself out first.
Absolutely. It's such a great way to think about the kind of purpose of your work. Because it also means that like when you're creating it, why you're creating it. It's not, frivolous to you. It's like, well, actually, this means something to me, and therefore it will mean something to somebody else, which I think is important.
Yeah.
What will your younger self think about your work?
I think he'd be very happy. I think he'd be happy that it continued to develop, and I also think that he'd be happy that other people took an interest, because for the first almost 10 years I was drawing like this. It was just for myself, and it was only for myself. And other people started showing my art for me, and when it resonated with other people, it was hugely validating. So I think he would be very happy to know that millions of people have seen my art, and a lot of people have resonated with it, and to know that my art exists in like 13 different countries right now is very exciting.
Yeah, and it's a great achievement as well. You should be very, very proud of it as well, because not every artist has that, and it's because you've worked hard for it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think he'd be impressed by the discipline that I've had to kind of embrace, because he was not a disciplined person.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, like, do you think that had you had to start your work, let's just say you started your career today, do you think it would be the same?
No. Yeah, I think it would be hugely different.
Okay, so the final question, double barrel question, is what are you currently working on, and where can people find more about you and your work?
I'm Will this stream be shown?
No, it's just the audio.
Okay, I was just going to pick up the drawing that I'm sitting next
sorry.
to. But
Sorry.
no, I'm always working on originals. I am editing my novel. I have an art show today in DC. I have a show in Chicago on January 2nd at the Elephant Room Gallery. I'll have some pieces up at Ray's Contemporary in January in New York City. And I think I have another show in April in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And if people want to find me, it's at Eric Hagan Art with underscores in between each word on Instagram. I have a TikTok somewhere that I forgot the username. And I'm Tandizo Jerry on Reddit.
That's absolutely perfect. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. This was lovely.
That concludes my conversation with the artist Eric Hagan. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments about it, please send me an email over at theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com. Get in touch via social media sites such as X and Instagram. The Flying Fruit Bowl podcast can be found on a variety of sites such as Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing on any of these platforms to help spread the word. Also, don't forget to check out theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk for daily art inspiration, and if you're a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. The Flying Fruit Bowl also has a Patreon page for monthly donations. Tiers start from £1, and more information can be found over at patreon.com/theflyingfruitbowl. Additionally, if monthly donations are not your thing, we have a PayPal for one-time donations. All donations go towards the running cost of the website and the podcast. I'll include a link to our PayPal in the show notes. Once again, thank you very much for listening. Till next time, folks, please stay safe.